Hello, my name is Joy Lanzendorfer, and I'm going to read a bit from my book, Right Back Where We Started From. It is literary historical fiction that spans 100 years of California history, from the gold rush to World War II San Francisco. This chapter is set in 1852 in Maine. It is a recorded fact that the Sanborn Ball was held during a thunderstorm. While the weather might have been enough to cancel an ordinary party, this ball was much anticipated by Maine society because the venerable judge, Luke Sanborn, was expected to announce the engagement of his son, James Sanborn, to a Miss Melissa Fletcher. On top of that, the judge had converted the attic of his 3-story house into a ballroom. When the guests arrived, they were directed up 2 flights of stairs to the 3rd story, where the new ballroom spanned the length of the house. The maple floors gleamed, and refreshments were laid out beside a barrel of Judge Sanborn's famous applejack. At the end of one room, a small orchestra was setting up. At the other, a balcony overlooked a field. Someone in reckless spirits had thrown open the doors, and an energized breeze blew through the room. Every so often, lightning struck the field, and each time the guests exclaimed, "Ooh!" Only Elmer Sanborn, James's cousin, remained unmoved. He had more important things to think about than lightning. In less than a month, he was planning to leave for the California gold rush. His family was against the plan and insisted he come to the ball, hoping that a young lady would distract him from his goals. But they could never understand how dull the twirling dancers seemed to Elmer. Compared to the sparkling promise of California gold, Maine society women were as ordinary as wrens to his eyes. As everyone danced, he stood by the wall, measuring the cost of the journey against the riches he expected to make in California. The newspaper said that a man could net over $1,500 a day in the gold rush. That was more than Elmer could expect as a yearly salary after a lifetime of working at his father's bank. Given this, Elmer couldn't understand why every man at this ball wasn't leaving for California this instant. Take his cousin James, whose engagement to Melissa Fletcher this ball was celebrating. Everyone said James was going to be a great lawyer like his father someday, but Elmer could only pity him. James would spend every day of his life rearranging papers in an office, while Elmer would be living a life of wealth and adventure. He had even asked his cousin to come with him to California, laying down how easy it would be to get rich, but James had proposed to Melissa instead. To do something like that when there was a gold rush going on, Elmer couldn't fathom it. Near the balcony, James was standing beside Melissa, who was patting the bottom of her ringlets so that they bounced upwards. She was talking to someone, a woman. Who was that? Elmer could only see the side of her head. He strained forward, squinting through the dancers that separated him from the balcony, until he recognized the girl. It was the piano player from church. Her name was Vera Webb. Here, Elmer tried to go back to thinking about the gold rush, but he kept trailing off to watch Vera. There was something arresting about her. It wasn't that she was prettier than the other girls here. Elmer wouldn't have even noticed her if she didn't get up in front of the congregation every Sunday. No, something else was drawing Elmer's attention to Vera as she stood on the balcony with the evening sky streaked purple and gray behind her. He blinked to clear his vision. Yes, it was still there. Vera was glowing blue. It wasn't so much that Vera herself was blue as the blue was hovering over her skin, encircling her face and neck, and fading into her clothes. It was a soft blue, the color of forget-me-nots, but noticeable enough that Elmer could see it from across the room. The feet of the dancers pounded to the rhythm of the Virginia reel as another gust of wind blasted the women's skirts. As if hypnotized, Elmer pushed through the dance floor to get closer to Vera. The blue outlined her body in a fuzzy radiance, like halos Elmer had seen in pictures of saints. She even looked a bit like a saint just then, smiling at Melissa with her hands clasped in front of her. Then, as Elmer watched, one of Vera's blonde curls rose off her forehead and stood straight in the air as if someone was holding it there. She was laughing, and the curl moved with her as she leaned forward and touched Melissa's arm with her icy blue hand. If nothing else, Elmer was a man of action. He dove across the room and tackled Vera, pushing her into the ballroom. The dancers stopped in collective shock. There was no time for outrage. As Vera's shoes cleared the balcony, there was a violent crack, like monstrous billiard balls slamming together. Lightning struck where Vera had been standing, hitting the balcony in a fierce stab as red and hot as a fireplace poker. Flames began to creep towards the ballroom. Before anyone could stop him, James Sanborn grabbed the barrel of Applejack and emptied it onto the fire. It was the wrong thing to do. Smoke billowed everywhere as the flames reacted to the liquor and traveled closer to the dancers. Women began to scream all over the room. "Everyone to the stables, the stables," Luke Sanborn shouted. The guests rushed towards the stairs. Though the door frame was wide enough for a man and woman to enter the ballroom in grand style, it wasn't wide enough for the minister's wife and two portly widows to shove through at once. For a moment, the women were caught like caterpillars in the beak of a bird, but then they burst into the hallway, petticoats flying up in all directions. While this was going on, Vera lay in Elmer's grasp, apparently having fainted. Undaunted and rather enjoying himself, Elmer picked Vera up and carried her through the stampeding guests to the stables, where she regained consciousness in time to be laid in a carriage. For a moment, she met Elmer's hazel eyes with her own. Then he grinned and galloped off to help with the fire. "That's a very brave young man," said a friend, watching Vera closely. "Yes," she said. She might have said something else then, but as the word left her mouth, rain began to pour down in a torrent. The balcony was doused and smoke rose to the sky. People hurried to their carriages, ball gowns slick like wet rose petals. As the women gathered around Vera, her blue eyes followed the men, rushing to keep the weakening fire from spreading. Onlookers noted how she watched one man in particular as he darted through the rain. Some later said she caused the fire by standing where lightning could hit her.